Hello, everyone. Is everyone ready? Yes.
I gotta go, okay?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Let me try to figure out a place to put this. And good afternoon to those of you who are watching online. I want to start off by talking about a new indictment obtained by my office. But before I continue with that, I want to remind everyone that all defendants are presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in a court of law. But today I'm announcing the indictment of Alex Bangash, Bangash, on new charges related to 2 additional sexual assaults. Some of you may recognize that name. For those who don't, Bangash is an accused serial rapist who was previously indicted for sexually assaulting 5 women dating back to 2018. After he was first arrested, he was held non-bondable. During a hearing, my office argued for him to continue to be held in custody without bond due to the violent nature of the crimes and the danger to the community. Instead, he was granted $250,000 and $75,000 cash-only bonds with electronic monitoring for the 2 cases. He posted those amounts and was released from jail. In March, he cut off his ankle monitor and fled the state. Tempe PD and U.S. Marshals, and thank you to them, tracked him down in Texas and arrested him. After he was brought back to Maricopa County, my prosecutors again argued for him to be held without bond, and this time the judge agreed. Since then, 2 new victims have come forward. The first one accuses Bangash of sexually assaulting her at a park, and this occurred in December of 22. The second says he sexually assaulted her at his home in Tempe in July of 2023. Recently, a grand jury indicted Bangash on a total of 7 new counts for sexual assault, kidnapping, and aggravated assault. My PIO can provide you with copies of the new indictment. It includes the 22 original charges filed, along with the 7 counts related to the newly disclosed sexual assaults. He's also charged in a separate count, or a separate case, for cutting off his ankle monitor, and he remains in custody without bond. Now, new topic, this Saturday, my office is hosting a Shred-A-Thon at Auxier Elementary School. That's Auxier, and that is in Queen Creek. This is to help people prevent becoming victims of identity theft, and anyone is welcome to come. You can bring up to 5 boxes of documents per vehicle, and volunteers from the Maricopa County Attorney's Office will be there to help you unload the boxes and move them into a truck to be safely and securely shredded. The Shred-A-Thon starts at 8 o'clock in the morning and goes until 11 o'clock or until the trucks are full, and sometimes they fill up pretty fast. So I would urge you to get there early. So I'm going to open it up now for questions, but first I want to say I know you're going to be asking questions about Abel, and I apologize if I'm saying this wrong, Gblah, Gblah, who was arrested in the sexual assault of a girl at a school in Phoenix. The man arrested was a convicted sex offender who was sentenced to probation after a plea agreement. I was made aware of his arrest yesterday. During the first case, I wasn't county attorney, and unfortunately I wasn't in sex crimes at the time. So I have many, if not all, of the same questions that you do. There's a lot of procedure involved. I've taken a look at the case a little bit. I'm going to look into it much more deeply, but I will answer your questions more thoroughly when I have the information to do so. And with that, I will open it up.
I just wanted to give you the opportunity to perhaps talk a little bit more. I have another question, but about the Shred-A-Thon. You know, what are, if you can go into a little more detail about, you know, how identity fraud, that type of stuff is committed using people's documents?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good opportunity for people to take bank records, et cetera, that might have account numbers, social security numbers, driver's license numbers, anything that they could be used by identity thieves to steal their identity and, get a charge card with that information, to shred that so that that's not something that you can just throw the entire document into a garbage bin and have somebody dig it out. So we want to help people get it shredded so that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I had another question about another indictment your office had obtained related to a Phoenix police officer who was on duty and was speeding over 50 miles over the speed limit. And the office hasn't released a name of the indicted officer. I was just wondering if you can give an explanation why that name hasn't been released.
Yeah, that's very simple. There is a state law that prohibits me from releasing information about an indicted individual until that has been served and opened. Having checked the court website just right before we came down, that hasn't happened, and so I'm not at liberty to talk about that.
Is that information about the, as a follow-up, like is the information about that particular indictment, is there anything traced, in the public record about it, or is by being sealed, is it completely, is there no case number that's available?
All I know is what I'm at liberty to talk about under the law, and I'm not at liberty to talk about it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeking the death penalty against Jarrell Davis and Jacree James in the Zariah Dodd case?
I'm reviewing that case, obviously, because those are first-degree murders committed by adults, and I review all of them. But at this point, I have not made a final decision. There's a little bit of time left on that. As I've talked about before, sometimes I will wait as closely to the deadline as possible or as reasonable so that I can get the most information before making that decision.
Prostitution arrests appear to be on the uptick. Are agencies like PD submitting more cases, even when most, if not all, will be reduced to misdemeanors?
Well, actually, all of the cases that are being submitted that I'm guessing that you're referring to are misdemeanors to start with. They're not being reduced. The act of prostitution or making a deal for prostitution on the part of the buyer or the sex worker is a misdemeanor. They are on the uptick in terms of being referred to us, and the reason for that is we received an appropriation from the legislature this year to tackle human trafficking, sex trafficking, and we are focused on the 27th Avenue corridor. That is a major track, as it's called in the lingo, of prostitution. We have heard for some time now the outcry of the neighbors in that area whose neighborhood is suffering not only from just the visible symptoms of prostitution, but also the drugs that go with it, the violence that goes with it, and they are very concerned about it. I've met a number of times with neighbors from that area. I've also heard the outcry of Grand Canyon University, which 27th Avenue runs through their campus area, and they're very concerned about that kind of, pimps and other traffickers being in that area when their kids are going to school. So we are focused on that area. As I said a couple of weeks ago in a kind of impromptu press conference, this is not the end, this is just the beginning, and we're going to take a broad brush approach to it and tackle the different elements that are present on 27th Avenue to clean that up.
Okay. And is there a holiday organized retail theft awareness or any busts?
Yes. As always, all year round, we're focused on organized retail crime. But we're going to continue to focus on it, and we're going to put out information to help shoppers and help retailers on dealing with organized retail crime. I can tell you that just recently, I think it was last week, we indicted an individual for 18 counts of organized retail crime. So it is still very real here, but our efforts to combat it are also very real here. So what I would say is this. If you're with a news station, if the word should go out to retailers, if you are seeing this type of crime, please report it to the police. And I've had retailers say, well, the police can't get there in time. That's okay. You can still provide video surveillance of what you've seen. You can still provide witness statements. If you can get, for example, a license plate, that's helpful as well. If you're a shopper who sees this kind of thing happen while you're out shopping, please report it to management of the store. We are very much looking to prosecute these types of cases to make sure it doesn't get the foothold here that it's got in other places. And but please do not interfere if you see this kind of thing happening. We've had some individuals hurt who try to interfere. It's not worth it. Just get the information and call police.
I had a question about the Cujo Young case.
Mm-hmm.
His attorneys are already treating it as a capital case. Are you planning to seek the death penalty?
I have not finalized, excuse me a second, sorry, I'm having voice trouble today. I have not finalized my review of that case. We're very close to finalizing that, though.
And then following up, can a case be flagged as a capital case before you file a notice?
We don't flag cases. There are cases I suspect that the defense attorneys may suspect would go capital, and maybe assign a capital qualified team, but we don't, we're not flagging it for that.
All right, thank you.
Following up on capital cases, as you know, for the last several months, we've been trying to quantify how much capital cases cost this office. When we asked for, the expenditures related to capital cases, we recently got a response from the records team saying that we do not track this information and therefore cannot provide this data. Is it really true that this office can't provide how much experts, et cetera, cost in capital cases?
Well, that's kind of two different questions. I mean, if you want to look at how much an expert costs in a capital case, yeah, obviously we pay an invoice on that. The difficulty we're fulfilling your request, as you know, in a rolling manner, is because this office wasn't always structured the way I have this office structured. If you go back to some of my predecessors, they actually had a combined homicide unit that prosecuted not only capital cases but also non-capital cases, and some of the attorneys handled both. And so separating out their salaries is trickier than you would think. Right now, I have a dedicated capital unit. But that said, let me also point out, and this is actually a good segue from the question that was asked right before you, understand that when a homicide happens, we don't know if it's going to be capital or not. We get a call from the police that there's a homicide, and depending on a number of factors that we evaluate, we can send capital attorneys out to the scene. And they can spend literally months working alongside police officers as they develop their investigation and getting briefed on that, reviewing documents, medical examiner reports, attending the autopsy, attending interviews, etc., and then only to have that case be decided not to be a death penalty case. So their salaries pay for that as well. So it's not as black and white as your request may assume it is. But we are providing, I think we've spent over 100 hours trying to respond to your records request, and we're continuing to spend time to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate the answer as it pertains to the salaries, but I guess if you are preparing invoices, et cetera, I mean, we do know what cases end up as capital, so is it really not possible to look at those cases that end up as capital and know what was spent on expenditures related to those, setting salaries aside, things like travel, expert costs, et cetera? I guess I'm just surprised. I think the public might be surprised that you know what cases are capital or have been capital, and yet we don't know how much it's cost to prosecute those cases.
Well, again, we don't keep, as I've told you in the past, we don't keep billable hours as to how much time attorneys spend on that case.
Not talking about attorneys, about like cost, like experts, travel, et cetera. So set the salaries aside. I guess, if we wanted to know, hey, the Jody Arias case was a huge case. How much did it cost to prosecute that case? I guess you're telling us there'd be no way to figure that out.
Well, you're asking about how much we would spend to, like, for example, fly in an expert here. Yeah, I guess you could ask, how much did you pay this expert to come here, be put up, and testify? But in terms of tracking it by case, we don't budget by case, we budget by division.
As a follow-up to that, I'm wondering if by division you have a budget for those expenditures.
We have a general line item in each division budget to address, for example, expert witnesses, understanding that some bureaus within the division may have higher costs than others.
What's the budget for the capital unit for such expenses?
I'd have to look at what the division budget is for
Okay.
that expense, and I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay, we'll email.
And then just a, follow-up, last question on this. Now that you do have a capital unit that you restructured the office, is this something you think to maybe make a little bit, I know not everything is as black and white as everybody hopes to be. That's always the case, usually the case. But I mean, we're talking about capital cases, the most, the life and death matters. And if people want to know how much these are costing, we're going to have to tell the public there's just no way to know that actual number or even really get close to it. And you said it took 100 hours to help get to the answers that we have so far. Is that really the level of record keeping that is available or exists? I guess that'd be pretty surprising to people to hear that that's what it takes to get to salary costs.
Well, I think it's, you're expecting us to keep a budget in a certain way, and that's not how this office does or has traditionally kept the budget. I mean, I'm looking at cases one at a time and deciding what justice dictates in each individual case. And if justice dictates seeking the death penalty, we seek the death penalty. If it doesn't, we don't. And then the expenditures that go toward that effort are evaluated as the case goes along. It would be impossible for me to predict ahead of time and therefore have a specific line item budget like you're asking for, to predict, how many homicides, how many of those are going to be first degree murder, what that's going to cost, what the defenses are going to be. I simply don't know. All I can do is make the best decision I can at the time, based on the resources that we have.
I guess one last question, just now that we're talking about capital cases. Recently, we learned the court is kind of setting up a new practice or policy where they are going to issue orders in new death cases. It necessarily hasn't happened yet, and ask the defense and the prosecution to come together within 2 years to essentially have like a settlement conference, plea agreement discussion. What do you think about that new practice or policy?
Well, I'm for anything that would speed up this process. I'd have to look at the final version of that policy as far as what the expectations are. The bottom line is, if that's in death penalty cases, those are in cases where we think the death penalty is warranted. It's not typically a situation where the death penalty is dropped because on a whim of a plea agreement, it's dropped because maybe evidence changes or, for example, witnesses die or something like that. And so whether it will help or not, I don't know. But if it does, that's great.
All right, thank you.
I want to go back to the Abel Gabla case. I know you mentioned that started when you were not county attorney, those initial crimes, but can you just talk about how something like that could happen and if there's a need to reevaluate how child predators are prosecuted?
I don't want to speculate on something that I haven't had a chance to read the police report and the original case yet. What I will say is I think one of the things that I need to take a look at is what that police report says, how it was charged, and then the process that they went through to get to the plea agreement that they got to. And that's one of the things that I'm going to be evaluating. Beyond that, I can't speculate, but obviously I have questions that I'm going to look into and get answered.
Can you talk about the plea deal for James Eastep? He's the serial rapist in Mesa. What exactly are the terms there? Can you tell us why a plea deal? Obviously, one of the victims is just 15 years old. Is that case not strong enough?
I would never take the existence of a plea deal to mean that the case is not strong. It can be due to a number of different things, including victims' wishes. That's not always the case, but it can be the case. because that's an ongoing case, I'm not really at liberty to talk about any sort of offer that was made by us or made by the defense. What I can say is my understanding is it's actually set for trial. So after it's over, I'm happy to talk about it.
Okay. Different case, a road rage that happened at Missouri and 7th Avenue recently. We know that Phoenix police submitted charges. Do you plan to pursue those charges? And if you don't, what message might that send? This is related to self-defense claims.
Yeah, I'm generally familiar with that case. It has been submitted to our office. It's been assigned to an attorney for review, and then it will be staffed beyond that. That hasn't happened yet, that final review and staffing. I don't want to speculate what message that would send, because first of all, I'm not saying that we're not filing it. We very well could file it. You know, we had a situation a few months ago where a grand jury didn't indict on a case that we did file, and it was a self-defense type of situation. And obviously the public was very aware of that and very concerned about it. And I think the message that people can take from all of these cases, whether we charge or not, whether it's self-defense or not, is this. Road rage is very prevalent in Arizona. We have far too many people being killed. One is too many people being killed. So if people are having anger problems, they need to leave their guns at home out of their car. If people encounter an aggressive driver, they need to disengage from that immediately. Don't risk it. Don't get out of your car. It is never, ever worth it. The situation I was referring to that happened a few months ago, we had a dad shot dead in front of his sons, and his son videotaped it. And having listened to the videotape, and I think you've listened to it too, it's haunting.
Yeah, I mean, is the way the law is written when it comes to self-defense, does it just make it challenging in Arizona to prosecute those cases? I know the burden of proof is a little different.
It does. It does make it challenging. You know, in Arizona, maybe a lot of people don't know this, you know, not only does the prosecution have to prove that the act happened beyond a reasonable doubt, but once self-defense is raised, and in many of these cases that's going to be the situation, then we have to disprove that it was self-defense. In other words, that it was reasonable, that it was an imminent fear. We have to disprove that beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's a very high burden when you have oftentimes what we had in that situation where you have two people, neither of whom had completely clean hands in how they were acting. I'm not saying anybody deserved what happened, but when two people don't have clean hands, it makes it very challenging with that law.
Some people feel that claiming self-defense seems to be a way to get away with murder in Arizona.
Yeah, I would, you know, in this day of video and, you know, digital evidence and that type of thing, I would urge people not to take that approach, because a lot of times we can show exactly what happened. In that situation that we're talking about, the Tempe road rage, there was video, and it was the victim who got out of his car and approached the person who shot.
And I just have one last question, switching gears completely here. This is about the Epstein files. One email exchange between Jeffrey Epstein and Steve Bannon included...
Please don't drag me into the Epstein file.
Well, I have a point, I promise.
Okay.
But, you know, there's an email that talks about lines of questioning that were suggested during Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing, specifically questions for Christine Blasey Ford, asking about medications she was on, suggesting that those medications may have created false memories. Of course, you interviewed her in front of Congress and asked her if she was on medication at the time. Did Steve Bannon or Brett Kavanaugh's attorney suggest that you asked that question? Did you have any contact with either of them before that interview?
No one wrote my questions for me, and no one reviewed the questions that I asked. Those were my questions. They were based on my experience as at that point, 22-year prosecuting sex crimes cases. Those were not to suggest that there were false memories, but it is always relevant in every single criminal case I've ever prosecuted, sex crimes or otherwise, whether witnesses have been drinking or taking medication, because it goes to their ability to remember and perceive. And it's not to cast aspersions on any one party or the other.
does it bother you that it seems Jeffrey Epstein suggested this question and you ended up asking it?
No, I think it was an appropriate question to answer, or to ask and to have answered. Until you asked this question, I had no idea what Jeffrey Epstein had asked or wanted asked of anything.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, thank you, everyone.
All right.